All right, for my next demo, I want to try building out this customizable character from scratch. Customizable character scene comes as part of SpriteMan 3D scenes clothing demo. When we hit play, we see that we can start customizing this character by clicking different things, giving him weapons, whatnot, longsword, changing things like boots, pants, giving him armor, giving him a helmet. So we're gonna recreate this from scratch using a new scene. So for that, we're gonna start with a brand new scene. I've already created one here called Close Demo, completely empty scene. I've also copied the sprites that we're going to start with, and we're starting in a very base state here, even with the sprites. So there are various sprites. First is going to be like a body character. You know, this is going to be our base sprite. Then there's going to be things like shoes, things like helmets. He's going to have hair. We can give him some pants. I don't know what that sprite sheet looks like. So anyway, these are the various sprite sheets, and this is what they initially look like when you put them into Unity. So we're going to change these guys to be sprites, and for now we're going to leave the sprite mode single, but we're going to have to slice all of these sprites up. So first, let's start with the body sprite sheet. We're going to go into our sprite editor, and what we're going to want to do is slice the sprites. First, we have to set this into multiple mode. Then we can go to the sprite editor. Apparently, it has to click apply first. And then we're going to slice it to, I believe it was, so these ones were 64 by 64. Okay. 64 by 64 grid size. And for the pivot, I'm going to actually leave the default to be center. So let's see what that ends up looking like. You know, we've sliced the things. They end up looking like this. The pivot is in the center. We can go ahead and change the pivot as well. So for example, if we'd rather have the pivots be at the bottom, we're going to have to reslice it. Slice again. Boom, that changes all the pivots. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the pivot at the bottom. So it's going to be at the feet, and the sprite, meaning that the sprite is going to rotate around the feet in the scene. Close that. When we expand this, we see that it created all the frames, but now all of these frames they have some very sloppy naming, you know, just 0 all the way up to the very end. Okay. What we're going to want to do next is we want to go in and actually change the names of all of these frames, and that's kind of done manually. Okay, so I guess that's done in the sprite editor. We have to now change the names for basically all of these. There's 170 something frames in here, so I'm going to skip that part, but I'm going to go through and rename all of these. So by section, these top frames are the cast frames. This is like a spell casting action. These are split into chunks by action. So this is going to be like spell casting. This next piece is going to be like a spear thrusting. This is a spear thrust. Next one, this is a walking animation. So this is going to be the walking sprites, walking frames. Next section is going to be like a sword slash. So this is going to be like a slash or attack. Slash is more accurate. This second to last one is going to be like when he's holding a bow. So this is going to be like shooting a bow. And then this last row down here is going to be his hurt or death animation, which I'll call hurt. All right, so I'm gonna start doing that in cast one, or yeah, cast. Oh, and the naming convention that I use here is I'm gonna start with action, cast dash direction north dot frame number, so 0 or 1, whichever you prefer. 1 probably is okay. So 1 is going to be cast dash north dot 2, cast dash north dot 3, and so on. Okay, so then once all the naming is done, you see that all the names are going to appear, very nicely here in your list when you expand the sprite sheet. In the sprite editor itself, so I've expedited this thing by copying a previous sprite, which already had all these names. Now, so this first sprite is set up, but if we were to go ahead and do the same process for a bunch of extra sprites, this would be very tedious. So here underneath Tools, SpriteMan 3D, we're going to open the SpriteMan Tools window. What we're going to do is we're going to save sprite sheet names. We're going to use this first tool here in this tool window. So we grab the one that we finished creating, the body male, we drag that into here. Then it's going to ask us for an output folder. We're going to go ahead and drag the same folder that we're currently in into this next output folder slot. And here it kind of tells us what it's going to do. It tells us that there's 178 slices that it can find and that it's going to save the names for. So now we click Save Map. It created a new file. And this thing is a scriptable object. It's called a sprite sheet map. And basically all it does is it saves the name for the slice that's at this position, at any given position. So it goes through all of the slices that exist in this sprite sheet, and it just saves off their names. So there's a few times when it's super useful to do this. The first is going to be now when we need to apply this to multiple sprite sheets. And the way we do that is by using another tool. So window, in tools, SpriteMan 3D, SpriteMan tools window. We're going to say replace sprite sheet names. And let's see how well this works. So the target is going to be our next sprite here, and then we're going to use the names that we saved off into this sprite sheet map. Boom, replace names. Okay, so I guess it didn't find them because, okay, so we select all of our sprite sheets, set them to multiple. I can't set them all multiple. Okay, so apparently I can't, you can only slice one sprite sheet at a time. Pivot bottom, grid by cell size slice. Okay, hit apply. So we go through the rest of these and keep slicing them. Apply. All right, now that we've sliced all of these sprite sheets, we can go ahead and use the tool. So tools, SpriteMan 3D, SpriteMan tools window. We're going to use the replace sprite sheet names tool. First it says to, the source sprite sheet names map. Next is going to be the sprite sheet. We hit replace, it definitely found all of them. Now that we see, okay, so no match found for hurt4. Okay, and why is that? So this is actually okay. When we look at this sprite sheet at hurt4, basically there's no sprite here because there's no renderable pixels. So it just left that one out for the boots. And that is actually okay. We can close this. Okay, so we can keep using the same tool for the rest of them. Okay, this replace sprite sheet names. However, the paid SpriteMan 3D has another feature called a sprite sheet batch. Sprite sheet batch. So when we created a new sprite sheet batch, which ended up in this folder called generated. We're going to take that guy and put him over in our folder where we're working with everything else. So we're going to call this guy the body parts batch. Body dash parts. And here's what he does. So we have this source mapping, sprite sheet map. We drag this guy into our source. And then in here, let's lock the inspector on that. Now we're going to select all of these sprite sheets that we want to apply that to, and we drag those into the targets. It's going to apply this to all nine sprite sheets. This is something that lives here in the project along with everything else. So we can unlock it, and we can access this anytime and then reprocess our batch. So we hit run and we wait to process those sprite sheets. And here we see the results. Okay, so again, some of these things aren't going to be found because there's no renderable pixels in these frames, for example, but they all exist in the body male, but they may not actually have any renderable frames in some of these animations. So next, now that we've done that, we can expand all of these sprite sheets and see that they've all been named properly. Okay, now that I've sliced and named all of my main sprite sheets to have the correct frame sizes and slices, there's another time when reprocessing a sprite sheet batch comes in very handy. And that's in this situation. So after I've done all that work, everything looks nice. I just realized that, hey, maybe, I don't want my pivot to be at the bottom of all these sprites, but I did all that work. And what I really want to do is I want to move the pivot up to the center of the sprites. Personally, I usually like having the pivots at the center of the sprite because it makes some of the in-game behavior a little bit nicer. Well, let's go ahead and do that and see what happens. So I'm going to reslice these to be centered. And then the thing is that as soon as I slice these, what it did is it renamed everything to those old ugly names. You see? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition the rest of these sprites. I'm going to reposition their pivots to be centered. Hit apply. And then of course now we have the old ugly naming. Slice. Apply. Centered. All right, so I've gone through and resliced all of these sprites again, and you know their naming reverted to the old ugly naming for all the frames. So all I have to do now, since I've already set all that stuff up before, I just have to go to this body parts sprite sheet batch, hit process batch again, wait for the tool to finish. It gives me the same type of output as before. And now we see that, you know, again, all of the naming has been applied correctly. We didn't lose any of our hard work from before. And, you know, all of the pivots have now been moved to the center instead of the bottom of the sprites.